You ready? Is it recording? Hello and welcome back to our episode of Neuronesses. Have you got your cup of tea, guys?
Got my cuppa.
I do. So today we thought we would talk about sleep again, but this time about sleep pathway and sort of interventions of how to help you with your sleep issues. I know as myself, quite often I can't get to sleep, or when I do sleep, I wake up several times, or then I can't get up in the morning because I feel absolutely exhausted. I remember when my children were little, they'd all be in the bed. I couldn't ever get sleep. I think they'd sleep trained me to the point where I could not sleep. So now I'm the quiet, literally the slightest movement, I'm up. And I'm sure other parents have the same issues where you can't get them to bed, or you have parents which go, "Oh, I follow this book and I'm dead on and they seem to be perfect." Or you've got other people like me, which were struggling, can't get them to bed. And even now, when it comes to some holidays or any holidays, they become nocturnal. They will stay up till 2, 3 in the morning and stay in bed to 2, 3 p.m.
So Steve, with little ones, and like you said, Helen, I've had this as well, where they just will not go to bed by themselves, or they're calling out all night long, and they really seem really frightened and really, sort of terrible to be on their own, that dreadful loneliness that they feel, and they're shouting down until eventually you give in and they come into bed with you, and it lasts for years. What's that all about then? Why is it they're wanting to be in with an adult?
It's a really good question. I mean, I think there's two parts to this. So we've got the atypical brain, so kind of just looking at normal kind of behavioral stuff. So, children sometimes just don't want to be in the dark, they don't want to be on their own, maybe they've been overstimulated, maybe their melatonin production hasn't gone in, their circadian rhythm's not quite right, they've just not got into the right sequence. And for that, you're kind of looking at those sleep hygiene techniques, kind of looking at those calming moments, those moments where you just do book time and all of those really wonderful strategies that everyone's heard for years about sleep hygiene. But then we've got the neurodivergent pathway, and what the recent evidence is showing is that actually that's just not a helpful strategy, and that actually we need to be thinking about, well, why is it a neurodivergent child really struggles with that sleep? So if we think about ADHDers, for example, we've got the fact that they can't turn their brain off. They've got this constant whirling, this constant thinking, that constant processing throughout the day. So for that kind of person, we're looking at a process called cognitive reshuffling. And what cognitive reshuffling is, it's about saying to the brain, I need to do something different. So if I'm stuck in a loop, if I'm stuck on something, I might start going pink unicorn, blue paperclip, cat, dog. And there's scripts that can be done for cognitive reshuffling. It sounds a bit odd, but the idea is we flood the brain with different things and it just breaks that spiral.
How do you do
Um,
that with children, like young babies? Because
you
obviously,
can do it with young children as long as they understand what it is you're asking them to do. So I dealt with a young lad not so long ago, and he was a Pokemon fan. And what we did, we used Pokemon figures in his script. So we did Pikachu, we did some of the characters, and we got him to think about those rather than the OCD thoughts that he was having, those negative thoughts. So they're just techniques for turning the cognition off. Lots of different things to do with that, and we'll probably go back to that through other discussions in a minute. With autism, though, we're thinking about that sensory stuff. So if we go back to that first video we did about those 8 sensory parts, if we've got that kind of echo dolphin field going out and we're getting lost in this space, we need to narrow that space down. And that's why children want to be cuddled and hugged, because it's that sensory field, isn't it? So you could replace that with a pregnancy pillow, kind of simulating that hug. I know that you can get those cots that go over beds, which kind of cages kind
The
of the
weighted
baby.
blankets, could you
Yeah,
use those?
you've got weighted blankets for all of that stuff. So really, it's the case of trying to work out what's the trigger and what's the behavior. And if we can understand the behavior, then we might be able to think about, well, what strategy do we need to use for that particular child?
if you've
If
got
you've
that, Sorry,
So
it's like if you've got like a 2-year-old and you try not for me, I used to try and put them to bed. I would sit there, do all the stories, and then I'd have to be in the bed. Then I'll either fall asleep or whatever. And then I would try and slowly get out of the bed. And I
no.
45 minutes, 2 hours, and I'm hands on there. And the minute I get out, wah, and I used to try to let them
Yeah.
scream. They'd be so distressed that they'd do much more.
Yeah, I've known parents who drag a mattress and sleep at the side of the
I've
bed.
been there.
And
I've
it
been there.
doesn't get any better. So what do you do with that? Because
So again, what we know about sleep is that melatonin production won't happen unless you're in a dark environment. Now, this goes against what lots of people do, which is have little lights on or little glowy lights. The problem with that is you are stopping the natural production for melatonin. So there's this balancing act that needs to take place. Equally, it may be the case that you can use kind of those noises, the brown noises, pink noises, white noises, so those soothing noises. So it is again looking at that sensory profile with that 2-year-old. So if your 2-year-old is always being held and hugged, of course they're going to want that body contact. So that weighted, that that pregnancy pillow around them, so they can feel that contact, narrowing that space down so they don't feel they're in such a wider space. So their perception field is narrowed and smaller. They may feel slightly more at ease. The reality is it really is kind of that pattern of behavior, kind of what were the triggers, what's going on, and kind of winding that down. And wind down can be quite difficult because we know with neurodivergent children, they don't wind down, they just stop. So it is about remembering if we are dysregulated, they are going to pick that up. So, as difficult as it is for us, regulating our breathing, keeping our nervous system calm, creating that soothing environment, and there's lots of other things you can look at, natural stuff in the room, kind of odorizing, whatever that you want to try. Um, it may work, depending again on the
So,
sensory
Steve,
profile.
would you advise you to be a tougher parent? Say, no, right, after this has happened, I am going to leave the room. That child is going to kick and scream and carry on, and I'm going to do it night after night after night.
Are you
Will it
talking
actually
about the whole
work?
let your child cry?
Yeah, the whole, and believe me, I have been there myself, and I know Helen has that that's not going to happen. The child is not going to stop crying. They're just not going to stop crying. If you did it night after night after night, would it help with a neurodivergent child? Or
Or
is
are
it
you
likely
creating
just to get
trauma?
more and more terrified and anxious?
Are you creating more trauma? And when we go to bed, so sleep is really important for multiple reasons. It stores and pushes in our day's memories. So everything that we've learned in that day gets processed. If the last thing that we're doing to the child is causing stress and trauma, the last thing that's being processed is stress and trauma. So you're literally imprinting stress and trauma. Um, Now, an atypical child who doesn't present as neurodivergent should accept those boundaries and follow those rules, But we're probably talking about those younger children that are head rocking, spinning around, they haven't got that eye contact, they're not necessarily playing properly with the toys. So you've got those really early toddler symptoms going on. And at that point, I'd probably be looking at a more sympathetic approach, which is pick your battles. If actually you need
So
to,
tiring though.
it's
It's tiring as
incredibly
a
tiring,
parent.
but you're not going to win, right? We've been there. We've all been there, and none of us have won that battle. And there is a
Now,
reason we don't win that battle because it's not being done deliberately.
And now actually they all want to sleep in and don't like getting up once you go through it. But when you're in that fog and you're so tired and you're trying to function
Yeah.
you end up just with all in your bed. And I kept thinking, well, they get to school age and they will start sleeping.
Yeah.
No, that's
But
still
there is equipment out there, right? So you've got those rocky blanket stuff, machines that will gently tilt and rock. There's those sensory stuffs in the room. So it really is trying to work out that sensory profile for a younger child. But if you move up, then obviously things start to change, right? Because behaviours change, the environment changes, the pressures of the days change. And you putting demands on somebody, if you've got a kind of an ODD, the opposite defiant disorder profile, or the PDA, the pathological avoidance demand profile, if you're putting a demand on that child, you're then just triggering them anyway. So it becomes a fight.
So for me, if the hotel room does not have blackout blinds, or now I do the last year have a mask, I can't sleep.
Yeah,
Is that
because
more of
that's your melatonin production, right?
and I've heard people like in comedy, I think it was the Peter Kay show, he was saying that he was taping up the doorways, anything, just because that light comes through and all you can see in that room when you're trying to sleep is the light catching under the bottom of the door.
My
So yeah,
4-year-old, he follows a little light. There's a little green light on one of his sensory toys. So you can be in a black room. He will get out of bed and he will sit and look at that little green light. He'll find the light because it stimulates and it's rewarding that reward system. When we put him in his little castle that we've made for him, which blacks that all out, he then settles straight away. He grabs his pillow, he lays in it, and we touch wood. And I know I'm probably jinxing myself. We can get
right.
between 7 and 10 hours sleep with him. But
So when a child is really quite young, what are the sort of signs you're looking for? Are you looking for a child who sort of hoards things and makes their bed heavy? I remember, divulging my own thing as a child myself, I liked heavy blankets. I liked to put lots of toys on the bottom of my feet, actually. I wanted that weight there. So if you're getting a child who's sort of hoarding things to make a smaller space, is that a sign that
design, yeah, I'd take that as a sign. But let's not forget, you may have the opposite end of that child, which doesn't like the tactile, which doesn't like the touch, which doesn't like the fur, which won't like the smell. So that would then go the other way. So what we're saying here is know your child's sensory profile, do a sensory profile questionnaire, look at what those triggers are, and try and work that out. Because once you've done that, you've probably won 90% of the battle. And dare I say, there is just acceptance. You know, my partner and I, we tag in. So we've got this agreement that it's pointless two of us being tired.
yeah,
So one of us then steps up, the other one gets rest, and then we rotate. Because equally, if you know your child isn't doing it deliberately, you've got to put those strategies in sometimes, and especially when your child's unwell. Like
mm.
it's just the worst. Because then that whole routine goes, and then that can be quite a tiring time.
Look out for early signs. Look at knowing the sensory profile of a very young child. It can be massively helpful. Pick your battles carefully because this is not one you're going to win. So you need strategies as adults and
Lots of
parents
strategies
to
for
help.
self-care
If
for
you're a single
yourself.
parent, you need help because you've got other children as well. They need a fully functioning adult, and a sleep deprived adult is no good to anybody. And we've got to remember as well that most of these things are hereditary. So it's quite likely that one of the parents have got a neurodivergency going on as well. So that's not going to be helpful. So when you've got a child, then let's hopefully we've got them through this process. There are older children. Maybe a worry box might be useful. Maybe, like you've said before, about writing things down to get it out of your head might be a strategy. What about then like Helen was saying about then the nocturnal type of activities of the older children? What can we do to
But
support them?
yeah, so older children, again, it is really looking at what's the problem here, what's going on. And the treatment for that is there's a program called ICBT, which is Information Technology Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, which we offer. We can do free prescriptions for that through our software. And in that, it's kind of like a cartoon ICBT program where you learn about your thoughts turn into behaviors, those behaviors become feelings. So looking at kind of why we're struggling with going to sleep and maybe that first line level of insomnia. So if that doesn't work, we can then kind of move that on to a different type of therapy called CBT-I, which is cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia. So that's really where you are targeting these thoughts and trying to turn them off. Again, you've got that cognitive reshuffling. So there's two treatment pathways there. One that you can start
Steve,
with
sorry,
instantly.
just for people who like, I'm not really clear on that. When you say a prescription,
Yeah.
you're not talking about medication there, are you talking about strategies?
Yeah, so the prescription basically, when the software releases the program, it'll release it as a prescription because it's prescribed therapy by somebody that has said this is for you. So when you get your login, it'll say this has been prescribed for you. So that's what we mean by that on that front. Um, so you've got the ICBT, you've got CBT-I. There's lots of other stuff out there. So there's guided meditations that you can use. So again, knowing the things that you like, you can have your own scripts made that just sends you off. And what's interesting with kind of the scripts that are available online, they're not personalized to you. So they don't have your name in it. They normally it's somebody's walking along a beach, or you've got the waves and the sounds. But what if you don't like water? That could be quite triggering. So the problem is, if you have a script made, it needs to be personal to you with the things that you like, which is going to turn your cognitive slow down. So that's kind of guided meditation there.
Do you find teenagers will do that?
Yeah. Some people love to listen to stuff. They can listen to it, it drifts off. So it's just another tool in the toolkit, right? Because what we're saying is this isn't a one size fits all thing. Um, you then got from that kind of your normal stuff. So you could go to a pharmacist and speak to a pharmacist and say, look, I'm having trouble sleeping. I'm a younger person, um, teenagey. Sometimes you might be able to use promethazine, which is antihistamine, 25 milligrams. If you speak to your pharmacist about that, you can do an over-the-counter stuff, and it's just a light sedation. There's other stuff that you can have. It's unlikely under the age of 18 you're going to get any kind of proper sleep meds. But again, there is that melatonin there, but you'd have to have that prescribed through a sleep clinic. And I'm fully aware that those sleep clinics are shutting down at the moment, and doctors won't prescribe that because it's a specialist drug, even though you can kind of purchase them, but don't be buying them online. Um, with the
I've heard
melatonin,
that, Steve. I've heard that melatonin, a lot of people with autism do get melatonin. Do you need a diagnosis of anything to be able to access melatonin as a
so
prescription?
it's an interesting one. With autism, there's a prolonged release melatonin for autism, which is very different to the other type of melatonin. So if you do have a diagnosis, there is a different type of melatonin for you. So it's, yes, we need
Really
to know.
important then to
So
get
Yes.
that diagnosis, get that.
you can't get the gummies like in France or somewhere. You have to do it properly.
Yeah, and the problem is with that stuff, you don't know what's in it. So, and you'll want the prolonged release because then it works a little bit kind of longer over them throughout the night. So, yeah, just be, speak to a prescriber because it is a medical thing. Um, so lots of different strategies, lots of different things that you can do. So, kind of therapy wise,
Hypnosis,
obviously.
like your other stuff, your hypno, is that a bit like your prescribed sort of sleep thing? Is that a bit?
Yeah, so all of that stuff that some of it can be really helpful, and it just depends. It depends what's going on in your life. If you're a highly anxious person, then ultimately you're already worrying about sleep before you're going to sleep. So actually,
I
is
want to
it the
wake
sleep
up with
that's
that.
the problem? Is it the anxiety that's the problem? And we've all been there where we've gone to sleep worrying about sleep because we've got a busy day the next day, or we then go to sleep and all we worry about is work. So we've not, what it is we just haven't turned it off. And if we'd have learned cognitively shuffling skills, or we learn those grounding skills, or we learn those relaxation skills, that will do it. The problem is if you follow, for neurodivergent people, if you follow that sleep hygiene rule, leaving us in a quiet room is not a good thing because we will spiral quicker than anything. We'll overthink, we'll worry, we'll catastrophize. So we need to keep our brain busy. We just need the right skill to turn the brain off. So having that discussion with somebody about, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. What can I do to turn that off? You'll get the right support. And then obviously for kind of moving on, you've got that adult pathway. However, saying all that, let's say you've done all of this stuff and you still have a sleep problem. In some cases, you may have a sleep disorder. Therefore, it's really important to get it checked because it could be a medical problem. There may be sleep apnea going on. There may be other things that are happening. And for that, you then need a further assessment where you kind of wear the watches and it does all the tracking. And yes, I know the apps do all of that stuff, but they're not medical graded. So they're not going to tell you exactly what's going on in the body. So it may be the fact that you need further work on that. So there is lots of advice and guidance out there. Just be mindful what you're looking for, because what you're looking for may be a blanket response and not tailored to you. And if it's not tailored to you, your profile, your needs, it's probably not going to work. And all that will do is reinforce the message, it's rubbish. So
And
what's
should
the
you
point?
be doing things yourself? Like, lots of people say you should be reducing caffeine, you should be reducing alcohol.
Okay, so
What's that your experience?
We know alcohol. I'm just assuming we all know about alcohol. We all know that alcohol
Last couple of days.
actually, yeah, alcohol, let's face it, in moderation's fine, but it's going to affect your sleep because it doesn't
Absolutely.
actually create a great night's sleep at all because you'll be up going to the toilet, you're going to have all of those dry mouth and all of that stuff. So we know alcohol doesn't
You'll
work.
go to sleep all right, but you'll be awake in 4 hours,
Yeah.
and that's it. Yeah.
Exactly. And then for stimuli, it's a personal thing, right? I can drink several cups of coffee and go to bed and have a really peaceful sleep because that stimuli has a relaxing effect on me. My brother-in-law, he had 1 cup of coffee and he's out cold. Like it just has that absolute calming effect. So it's a personal centered thing. We know ourselves, right? We know what works for us. So if it works for you, it works for you. What I wouldn't be, what we want to be avoiding is the worry and the overthinking. If you haven't had that cup of coffee and that's what you're used to, if you took that away, is your cognition going to be going, where's my cup of coffee? Why do I really need my cup of coffee? Oh, I don't feel the same without it. So
Yeah,
now
a
you've
friend
got to
of
put,
mine recently, she has a small like half a thing of yogurt before she goes to bed because she's realized that she's actually hungry during the night and it's causing her to wake up. But the yogurt just sees her through and never
yeah.
even thought about anything like that.
That's why when you was a kid, you used to get a cup of Horlicks. Not that I've had that in
Oh, I used to
years.
love Horlicks, yeah, because it's a way
I
to
love it.
drink,
Still
right?
have it.
Yeah,
But that's the thing, isn't it?
Is it
We've just got,
Fennigan? They used to give you a dollar per Fennigan, or was it
I
made?
think we're at it with all this.
Yeah, the
Oh,
parents would be like, right, you're not
not
sleeping.
so sure we can do that one anymore, right?
No, can't do that anymore at
not
all.
anymore.
This is
Not
so
No.
this show.
old.
I think the
So,
message
yeah,
is
have your
it's
milky
personal
drink
centered.
and count sheep, which is your shuffling.
Well, absolutely. The problem with counting sheep is it is an obvious thing. So if you're doing something in sequence, the brain will work out that you're doing something in a sequence. The idea of cognitive reshuffling is that you're confusing it. So there's different things that you do for that. So we've kind of moved it on from counting sheep, but yeah, in
We've
The
essence.
also got
same.
the menopause where people can't sleep because the hormones are changing. So what are you
Mm.
meant to do when that comes along?
Whole new talk, Helen.
Yeah, yeah. And again, menopause and ADHD as well, right?
The hormones, it's really linked. The
But
estrogen
the
levels.
the environment is really important for us. So when we look at our sleep environment, it needs to be calm, it needs to be relaxing, it needs to be cool. And yeah, absolutely, we need to feel safe because if we're not, and aren't we just going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Those basic building blocks need to be there.
Yeah.
So if you haven't got those, and it is normal as well to be up and worry about normal things in life, like paying your bills, big interview, or exams. That's normal anxiety and normal worry. So let's call it that. This is a normal feeling. I'm meant to be doing this, or a big day's coming up. That's normal. So yeah, so I think it's just have those discussions, look at those different strategies, but recognize different strategies for different people with different conditions. And I think what's happened through the decades, it was sleep hygiene cures all, and it doesn't because we're
One thing doesn't fit everything. Like we're just discussing about making your child scream because people go, "That's what you need to do. Just ignore them." We've already discussed that doesn't work if your child's autistic or ADHD, and it's
of
about
course.
accepting that one doesn't help me or might help them, but
Exactly, and acceptance is really important, isn't it? You know, nobody's doing it out of spite. Nobody's trying to do it to make your life hard. It may feel like that. That's what we think, but it's not, is
Yeah,
it?
which leads us on as well to maybe something we could talk about again about incontinence in children, because that's usually another factor, isn't it? Especially with your autistic or ADHD
Dual
brain.
listening
That,
skills.
I
That's
I
a
think
whole new topic.
that sums it up quite nicely for today. So if you've got any questions, put it in the link. If you want to like message us, then just literally any questions you want us to discuss, then put it in the link.
Lovely.
All right. Thanks,
Take
Dee.
care,
Thanks,
everyone.
Jeanette.
see you again.
Bye.